It's our pleasure to be joined by one of the hardest working men in all of college football media. He hosts McElroy and Cubelic in the morning on Jocks 94.5 in Birmingham. He's quite possibly the most handsome man I know. You can hear him on SiriusXM. You can see him all over the ESPN platforms. He is Cole Cubelic. What's going on, man?
What's up, fellas? I'm great, doing well. Just trying to wrap up bowl season here. Got one more to go, so excited about it. But it's everything's good. Hope you guys are having a happy New Year.
Yeah. Before we talk about that last game we've got coming on Monday, looking at the semifinal games, when you look at what Bama did to Cincinnati and you look at what Georgia did to Michigan, Cole, no one covers the SEC closer than you do. Who were you more impressed by in their win in those semifinals?
Oh, it's definitely Georgia, because for me, going into the playoff, the biggest question I had about any of it, be it matchup, personnel, coaching styles, individuals or position group versus position group. The biggest question that I had was, where was Georgia going to be mentally and emotionally? And sometimes I think it's difficult even for people outside of the footprint here in the Southeast to understand how far that pendulum swung when Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. I mean, that number one seed was taken away. The Heisman Trophy was won that day. The unstoppable, insurmountable object, removable wall defense that Georgia had was no longer that. That was gone. Not to mention the mental hurdle of Kirby Smart versus Nick Saban, Georgia versus Alabama. Kirby goes to 0-4 against Nick. Georgia goes to 0-3 against Alabama in the SEC championship game. All being done, by the way, on the same field that 3 years prior, Tua came in and stole a national championship from that same program on the exact same field. So I just think that those demons were all awakened a little bit more as to, can this be done? Will this be done? Is it possible? Is it feasible? You guys know those mental hurdles and obstacles are very real for players, coaches. And I think sometimes too, we go a little bit too far with that. As I was asked on an interview this morning that I did, is Nick Saban in Kirby Smart's head? Does he own rent in Kirby Smart's head? And I think we immediately view that as someone who walks into an event and just physically cannot contain themselves. Like that a quarterback can't even put his hands under center because they're trembling so bad. I can't take the snap. Or a batter who gets in against Nolan Ryan and he's like, I can't even hold my bat. I'm so scared. It doesn't have to be that to be in someone's head. Does it affect you to the point that your decision-making is different? Does it alter your demeanor in how you react or act in that event? And I think that's where that impact could be very real, because I thought Kirby was a little too aggressive in the previous matchup. I thought some of the stuff they did on defense was almost nonsensical. And that's a very precision-based pressure group that they have. And it almost felt like they just said, here we are. We're better than you at it. And so we're just going to go do what we do. And nobody does that against Alabama. When you're playing a team that's as or almost as or more talented than you are, you guys know it's scheme and execution at that point. And I didn't feel like that was the emphasis for Kirby and his coaching staff going into the Alabama game last time. So Georgia answered that question for me. There is no mental, emotional layover. Physically, they showed up. Emotionally, they showed up. They looked faster. They looked bigger. They looked stronger. They looked like they wanted it more. So I took all of that and put it to rest, because that was my biggest question going into the playoffs. So obviously, I think I came away more impressed with Georgia.
You touched on a little bit there, but forget the middle aspect of it, because, I think everyone's kind of aware of that situation. But X's and O's wise, how much can we take from the SEC championship and Alabama and how they really dismantled that defense through the air? Is there something that we can look at there that we feel like is going to carry over, or do you feel like Georgia's going to have answers to that?
I think a little bit of both, Teddy. And I think the carryover that if I'm a Georgia fan, I'd be concerned about is the lack of an ability to get home. And, I think it's not just Jordan Davis up front for that defense. I mean, there are a lot of guys that have the ability to be able to get to the quarterback. And it just felt like Georgia was not capable of doing it, or at least consistently they weren't able to do it. And so that would be a big concern for me. Now, on the flip side of that, Alabama's obviously got some issues on the offensive line. 2 of your starters left the game against Cincinnati. What's it going to look like? How healthy are they going to be? I think, it's not just Jordan Davis. It's Devonta Wyatt. It's Jalen Carter. It's Nolan Smith. It's Quay Walker. There are a lot of different guys that have that ability, and they just couldn't do it consistently against Alabama the first time around. So I think that can carry over, and maybe not in a positive way. But one thing that I don't think will carry over is how the secondary is managed, because without John Mechie, that changes who Alabama is. And you saw it against Cincinnati. Jamison Williams all of a sudden is your possession guy on third downs. He's working the middle of the field a little bit more. There's more intermediate routes that he's going to have to work, basically trying to get him the ball, but also because you don't have that other target. So I think Georgia now has the luxury to be able to say there's one true concern in the passing game. If we want to double him, if we want to bracket him, if we want to press him to reroute him, knowing that we have safety help over the top, we can do that and not have to be as concerned about what might be on the other side or what might be lined up somewhere else. It's not that Alabama doesn't have any other weapons. They do, but Mechie's got, I think, 95 catches this year, 92 catches this year. I mean, you saw when Williams went out, and I mean, Mechie's got 96 for 1142. It's stupid. So, and all we talk about is Jamison Williams. When Williams went out of the Iron Bowl, I think Mechie had like 23 targets in that game. I mean, it's like he was then the guy that they had to go to and they had to attack with. So I think structurally that will allow Georgia to change some things and maybe not be in as many positions of danger with being taken advantage of in coverage, because now you're not going to have to worry about 2 of those guys. It's really just one of those guys that you have to be concerned about.
Brian Robinson was banged up going to the SEC title game. He looked very much healthy against Cincinnati. Do you think that maybe Georgia's so concerned about what Alabama and Bryce Young did in the passing game in the first matchup? Do you think that Bama, even with those O-line issues and those question marks, do you think Brian Robinson in that running game could get going a little bit, or no?
No. They're not doing to that Georgia front what they just did to Cincinnati. And I would love to sit next to Teddy Lehman and watch that Cincinnati defensive film, because the linebacker play was not good. That's as nice as I can say it. And physically up front, I thought the D-line would hold up a little bit better. They didn't. But this is a different animal that's coming in now. I mean, you're going to get 2 320-plus pound defensive tackles in the game at the same time. And you're going to get heavy-handed defensive ends that can play very physical football at the point of attack. They're not going to push this group around. And I think you saw that last time. One of the big adjustments that I thought Bill O'Brien made in the first matchup was basically to say, we get in trouble when teams pressure to the back. And Durante Jones, LSU defensive coordinator, did a great job of it. And we had him the next week. And I asked him, I said, was there any significance in why you pressured to the back as much as you did? And he kind of just looked at me and he said, yeah, no, it was strategic, because you think about any team that's RPO or play action based. Now, not necessarily old school play action based, but new school play action based. When you run an RPO, you have to have a run fake. So what does the back have to do? He has to leave wherever he is. So if you know that a team does that 30, 40 times a game, 25 times a game, you're going to win the numbers game in pressuring to that side, because there's now a body gone. And I'm surprised more teams didn't pick up on it earlier in the year, but almost every drop that Bryce Young takes up to the SEC championship game, there was some sort of a ball fake, be it play action or RPO. Well, what Bill O'Brien did is said, we're not going to go as RPO play action heavy. We're going to leave the back and therefore not be down to me on that side of our protection. And that's one of the reasons I think they were able to hold up so well against Georgia last time. So now he'll have the ability to maybe mix both of those, but still that defensive line's too big, too strong, too physical, too nasty for Bama to just say, oh yeah, we're going to run right at you. We're going inside zone, outside zone. we're going to hand it off to Robinson 25 times, and we expect to sort of control the tempo of the game that way. That part of this game will not take place. It just won't. And I think Evan Neal is fantastic. I think whoever's in at center, McLaughlin or Dalcourt, they've both played good ball this year. But I don't know if EQ or Owens are going to start, are going to play, are going to be 80%, 40%. I have no idea. But it doesn't really matter because that group's not pushing the Georgia front around. They're just not.
Well, I like Stetson Bennett. I think he's done a good job with what they've asked him to do. But you look at this title game, Mac Jones last year, Joe Burrow in 19. I mean, to win this game, typically you've had to have a unbelievable quarterback and fantastic play at quarterback. Is the discrepancy here quarterback wise in Alabama's favor? Is that too much for Georgia to overcome?
Probably. And I think it's, if we went down, we kind of had some fun on my show this morning with McElroy. Like, I remember when I was at Auburn, our school newspaper was the Plainsman. And on Thursdays, you'd get the Plainsman and we would be playing Mississippi State or whatever. And it would have the two teams and then the position groups and the checks, so like O-line, Auburn, D-line, Mississippi State. And I remember as a player, I would always sit there, look at that and think, who gives a shit? Because the O-lines aren't playing each other.
Right.
Like the tight ends aren't playing one another. Like our receivers aren't trying to cover their receivers. Like at least match up against who's going to be matching up. But if you played that game with these two teams, I think Georgia would have the slight edge. But it comes back down to quarterback and head coach. And to me, that is most likely going to end up being the difference in this game. And with what Bryce Young's able to create on his own, with what he's able to do with his accuracy, and then with what Bill O'Brien is able to do with him in the game, that offense runs through him. This is not an offense that, you guys see it. It's not a look at me offense, a check with me offense. They don't come to the line of scrimmage and look and see and then get a new play. Like it all goes through him. He has a lot of responsibility and he has a lot of freedom at that line of scrimmage because he's that good and he sees things extremely well. So I think the differential in quarterback, the gap is that big. And the other part of what you said, and we've talked about this morning too, it's not just quarterbacks, but it feels like big time wide receiver play in this game has also happened the last couple of years. You need a quarterback, but you also need some. Look at what Jamar Chase is doing right now with the Bengals. It should be no surprise what he did to that Clemson defense. Devonta Smith, it should be no surprise what he did to Ohio State last year. So you got to have a couple of those Frisbee catching dogs, as Mark Packer would say. And even with the injuries Alabama has, I almost lean their group a little bit more. That the Georgia receiver group is just not super dynamic. They're not. Pickens can be, but the rest of them are just solid. They're not a lot of guys that are going to wow you and take over a game, so to speak. And maybe George does it in this game. I think he's got 4 catches, played in 4 games. He's got like 5 or 6 catches. So he's healthy enough to do it, but I don't know if they're really going to actually push that much of the game plan in his direction.
I'm with you when it comes to, you got to have those like big play pass catchers to win this game. But we saw what James Cook was able to do against Michigan. But is it possible that Brock Bowers is kind of the key to this game for Georgia? Like he had a good SEC title game. Is he the guy that could kind of swing this thing for the Dogs offensively?
Well, here's the one problem is Brock Bowers is not hiding from anyone anymore. That's just not happening. And not that he's their leading receiver, and not that he's really been hiding from people for a long time. But what's weird about it is I had the Georgia spring game and I talked to Kirby a lot about Darnell Washington, and I love John Fitzpatrick. He gets no credit. I think he's a solid blocker. I think he does a lot of the dirty work, heavy lifting for this team, and no one ever talks about him. But then we get into the game and I see 19 moving around a little bit. And I'm like, Coach, who's this kid? And they made it clear, members of that staff, that they were trying to hide him in the spring game and that they essentially knew what they had on their hands and they didn't want a lot of other people to know going into the season. So that can't happen anymore. Now, it's not that Alabama didn't know who he was. It's not that Tennessee didn't know who he was later in the year. He had been playing, but I do think he's taken on a little bit of a new role as sort of the playmaker on that offense. Now, I love what Monken did with Cook in the Michigan game because I think he's their most dynamic player, period. And to move him, force feed him the football, I think that has to happen. But I do think Brock Bowers could be the X factor because how are you matching up with him? And same thing goes for Cook, because if you're lining Bowers up as a tight end and moving him out, or you're lining Cook up as a running back and moving him out, your defense has been dictated by 11 or 12 or 22 or 13, whatever it is, as a running back and a tight end. So Pete Golding's going to have to be really intelligent with how he dials up his defensive personnel based on what Georgia has in the game, probably knowing that Cook's going to move out a lot, Bowers is going to move around a lot, and not necessarily be an H or a tight end or anything like that as to who they designate is going to be covering him. Christian Harris is going to be really valuable because Christian Harris played corner in high school and moved to Will just so he can do these kind of things on this Alabama defense. He's that fast, and he hasn't had an amazing year. He had a little bit of a letdown year based on what a lot of people thought he was going to have, myself included, but he has the speed to be able to negate some of that. I don't think any linebacker in the country is just matching up with those two, either one of them. You're just not. I mean, there's too many advantages for an offensive player at that point. So you've got to have somebody with better cover skills if you're going to man them up. And it could be a legit matchup problem, but I would imagine going in, it's a major emphasis for Alabama as to how to try to take him away.
I want to go back to the mental warfare part of this real quick. And you guys know this. Locker rooms are really smart. Now, individually, the players may be all stupid, but as a group, locker rooms are really smart. And I bet there's a sense from the Georgia locker room that Coach Saban's got our coach's number, right? There's something going on there. He's got his number. Do you think Kirby Smart has to do something in this preparation or maybe in the game plan to win his team over to say, like, I'm not scared of Saban. We're not scared of Alabama. We're going out. We're not going out cautious. We're not playing to lose the game. We're getting aggressive. Is there something maybe in the game plan that he's going to have to do to prove that to his team that they're going out there to win the thing?
It's a great point about the locker room. And even if it's not a part of the conversation in the locker room, Teddy, they're hearing it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they Twitter, watching
friends
TV, radio, friends, classmates, whatever, they're hearing it that, hey, you guys he can't get it done against Nick. And that's that. I don't think it's something in the game plan though, but there is one thing that I think he can do that would go a long way in telling his team it's okay, so to speak, and that you can go win this game. And it's pretty simple. Just relax. I think that's it. I think it's that easy because if you watch him at the end of the half of the Michigan game and he's losing his mind on Stetson Bennett, which Stetson didn't handle it well. The time management was poor, but I forget what they were up 21-7 or something like, and even if they were up 34-7 or 14-7, nobody watching that game thought Michigan had a chance to win it. You were in control of that game is the point. And he's losing his mind. He's yelling, he's pointing his finger. And in the interview, he's like, Stetson blew it, this and that. He's got to relax. And I think if he can sort of calm down, I know the intense part is somewhat a part of who he is and getting the guys pumped up and ready to play. But I also think that there's a tightness that begins to show up there. And kind of like what you're alluding to, I think your players see like, oh, hell, like he's wound up today. Like this is not good. And so I think finding his calm through this week and maybe even leading into this game could be very valuable for Kirby Smart.
There's a couple substances out there for that. We'll see what Kirby dials up, but I'll let you go on a simple one, man. How do you see this thing going?
Like we mentioned, from a matchup perspective, I'm really intrigued with how Alabama's offensive line looks when they take the field and how healthy they are, because they played phenomenal football the last time around. And if they can hold up 75-85% as well as they did last time, they're going to win the football game. And I do think that no John Mechie is going to make a difference. But we've seen other guys in this Alabama receiving corps step up at different points in time here late in the year. You go back to the Iron Bowl when Williams goes out and Ja'Cory Brooks is making a few plays. And then you go to the Georgia game after Mechie was out, and Trayshawn Holden's making a few plays. Slade Bolden has made some plays against Cincinnati. So different guys are stepping up in different ways. You still have Jaleel Billingsley. You still have Cam Latu. You still have JoJo Earl. Those are other guys that have made plays throughout the course of the year that could potentially be guys to sort of help carry the rest of that and shoulder the rest of that. And I think coverage-wise, how Kirby and Dan are able to maneuver some things because of no John Mechie is going to be interesting to watch. I think the fact that Dan Lanning is now the head coach at Oregon and not interviewing for multiple head coaching jobs leading into this game could also benefit him to a certain extent and benefit their plan and maybe just relax him a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's quarterback and head coach. And we can go O-line, D-line, receivers, DBs, running backs, linebackers. We can go all through it and talk about every matchup, every way possible. And you know what? It's going to be really close every time, because I can sell you that Georgia's got the better D-line, and I can say that Alabama's got the better D-line. I can sell you linebackers back and forth, DBs back and forth, receivers, I'm going to probably lean Alabama. Tight ends, I'm going to probably lean Georgia. Running backs, I'm going to lean Georgia. But quarterback goes to Alabama. And go back to the Iron Bowl when he walked that team back down the field in Jordan-Hare Stadium to tie that game and then go win it, or jumping out on Georgia the way that he did, or battling through the LSU game the way that he did. He's been put in a lot of different situations that weren't necessarily comfortable and found ways to win. I also think Alabama can play more styles of game and win than Georgia can. And Georgia, I think Georgia wants a fist fight. And I think that's what they showed against Michigan. And they said, we think you want one too, but let's see how bad you want it. And Georgia wanted it more. I think if they go try to take a fist fight to Alabama, Alabama can hold up just fine. And if that means that it's 17-13 with 2:05 left in the fourth quarter, I think Nick Saban says, we'll take that. As long as we get the ball last, we're good. As long as I can give the ball to 9 at the end, let's see how it plays out. I'll roll my dice on that one. I'll push all my chips to the middle of the table if we're down 3, 4, 6, and I get to give the ball to number 9 with just enough time left to move down the field. I think he'd be a fine play in that game. Georgia doesn't want a shootout. Bama would love it. They would love to run that thing up and down the field for the entire game. So I just think that there are a few more avenues in which Alabama will be able to find their way to win. The mental part of it is very real. And I just think that when you get to a game like this, the talent is close. It's maybe slanted one way or the other. It's head coach and quarterback, man. And Alabama's got the advantage at quarterback, and Alabama's got the advantage at head coach.
Yep. I'm with you. One team's got Nick Saban, the other doesn't. It's that simple for me, man.
It's like my old quarterback in college used to tell us, football ain't hard. We try to make it hard, but guys, football ain't hard. They got the better quarterback. They got the better coach.
Yep. We'll see.
Now, crazy things happen. I mean, anything can happen, but if you're asking me the way I think it's going to play out, two teams that are pretty close in talent, two teams that have accomplished a lot this year, I'm probably going to them. And not to mention, one just beat the hell out of the other one a month ago. So,
right.
Yeah. Cole, you're the man. As always, man, appreciate your time. You're the best.
Absolutely. Always enjoy being with you guys. Look forward to doing it again soon.